Welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. This is web editor Nicole Raleigh, and today I have with me Dr. Pamela Tenaerts, Chief Medical Officer at Medable, for a Post-ASCO 2025 conversation about a new digital-first model to handle long-term follow-up care for cell and gene therapy cancer trials. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you for having me, Nicole. It's my pleasure and an honor to be here.
So when it comes to CGTs, long-term follow-up care is an issue that makes patient access to these novel investigative treatments extremely limited, given the 15 years that patients must still engage with the trial after receiving the medication. With Medable's platform, however, decentralized site engagement could mean that cell and gene therapies will be available to many millions more patients, for many of whom this could be their only hope. Before we dive into that central topic, though, Pamela, perhaps you could share with listeners a little bit about your journey and the passions that led you to doing what you do today at Medable.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you for that question. So I think many will know that I'm a physician by training, and I've always been attracted to medicine because of my need to help patients and to sort of make life better for people in general. So I had a private practice for a while, but quickly learned that I wanted to have more impact and transition into clinical trials where I felt that if we did good clinical trials, we could really help people get medications that they need. And it's both about the methodology of the clinical trials and the diseases that we study. And I've been really proud of the work and the progress we've made over the time that I've been working clinical trial. But at the same time, I remain frustrated with the slowness of the pace of adoption of new technologies, or maybe even the knowledge we have about new methodologies to make things better. And which led me to becoming the executive director at the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, where we were really looking in this public-private partnership between Food and Drug Administration and Duke University to improve quality and efficiency of clinical trials, which that led us to technology as one of those options of improving clinical trials. Medable was a member of CITI at the time. And so Michelle reached out to me and asked if I wanted to help implement technology in a responsible way. And that is how I came to be at Medable, where, we have a platform that uses technology, consenting remotely or consenting online, televisits, clinical outcome assessments that could be done on the phone instead of on a paper questionnaire at the research sites, connected sensors and things that really allowed participants to participate in a way that decreased the burden of travel and parking and all of that to them to research sites. Because I had seen firsthand what that hurdle was. I also happened to run a site for about 12 years. And I really feel like we could do so much better, but we need to understand what those elements bring and what the value impact is. And if something isn't working, we need to tweak it. So I remain optimistic, but I was at a meeting last week and sometimes I'm like, why aren't we any further? We should be doing this better generally for patients, because there are so many diseases that still need solutions and medications and treatments.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Pamela. Now, CGTs, or cell and gene therapies, offer transformative potential, as we've been discussing, yet they also require, as I said earlier, prolonged safety monitoring, often spanning that magic number of 15 years post-treatment. And traditional models for long-term follow-up impose logistical and financial challenges on the participants, as Pamela was explaining, contributing to lower participation and high attrition rates over time. Indeed, according to a 2024 survey conducted by the Emily Whitehead Foundation and Catalyst Healthcare Consulting, 20% of CAR T-cell therapy patients stop participating in long-term follow-up altogether, with 80% of that group ceasing participation at or after 5 years post-treatment. And indeed, the burdens that Pamela was listing, which include distance to sites, even lack of awareness about local follow-up options, and travel in other capacities are frequently cited as the key barriers for these percentage numbers. So, all this considered, Medable, with its platform option, was on site at the 2025 ASCO Congress in Chicago this year. No doubt, we're speaking in 2025 to discuss how the company's approach prioritizes patient comfort, simplifies trial execution, and enhances patient engagement. And it is designed specifically for sponsors, CROs, clinical ops leaders, and healthcare providers. After all, oncology trials shouldn't be complicated for patients or for sites. And unfortunately for pharmaphorum, we were unable to catch up with Medable on site at the Congress. But that's why we are now recording this episode of the podcast. So, Pamela, how was ASCO 2025 for Medable?
Well, ASCO is always one of those amazing meetings where science comes together and shows the improvements it can create for human life. And there was no shortage of announcements of trial results that really make a big difference in patients' lives. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to many of the actual presentations, but the buzz was there. I'm sure you felt it too about, it's just finally coming together. And in big part, it's also because of these cell and gene therapies. For Medable, we had great, a great set of conversations with people who feel the same way as we do, that clinical trials can be done better. The Oncology Center of Excellence has indicated that they are, in favor of bringing in the patient's voice into clinical trials and making it simpler for patients to participate in clinical trials. So we've had a lot of conversations about how to use technology to help with that. And what the goals are of any pharma company that results in benefit to the patients is they have a treatment that they believe is going to be super beneficial for a participant. And they want to have the best way to test that in a population that is representative. And then so that the results can be extrapolated to people living with that condition. And technology can really help with that, for regular oncology clinical trials. But again, even more pronounced because of the statistics you just mentioned from the Emily Whitehead Foundation for Cell and Gene Therapy, because it is burdensome to participate in clinical trials traditionally, and it doesn't have to be. So we had really good conversations about how to use technologies, bringing the power of clinical outcome assessments to somebody's phone instead of having to come in and fill out paper questionnaires, allowing visits to be done by local healthcare providers as long as it's within their practice of scope, and allowing the use of sensors to collect data that maybe you don't have to go to a doctor's office anymore to do a 6-minute walk test when you can use a sensor on your arm to collect that same information. So the one thing about oncology, people are always saying that oncology trials are complicated, and they are because of the complication of the disease. Personally, I don't think that trials have to be that complicated. The real premise is still the same. We have to collect reliable, actionable data, and we have to do it in a way that keeps participants safe so that if any safety signals arise during a trial, they can be alerted because they're still all volunteers in a trial. And I think people are coming around to the idea that technology can really help with that. In cell and gene therapy, even more so because of the long-term commitments. The reason we do this 15-year follow-up is not just because it sounds interesting, it's because these are novel technologies that at the core change the DNA of a person, or a cell thing. So we see an immediate effect in alleviation of disease. I mean, at ASCO it wasn't hemophilia, but you can treat a disease, but then you need to know whether there's durability for one. Like, do we have to repeat this treatment if maybe the cancer comes back, or what are the side effects that happen over time? And so setting this up in a way that is sustainable for patients who often come from far and wide to get these treatments in experimental studies, but also make it sustainable for pharma companies and biotechs who want to bring these therapies to life and to patients, but need to um, comply with this requirement for follow-up. So I mean, all that to say that there's definitely an appetite for doing things better, and we're so happy that Medable is part of that conversation.
Thank you, Pamela. And as you say, although cancer itself is a complicated disease, the trials don't have to be, and really they shouldn't be for patients. So let's tunnel down into Medable's platform itself. As we've been discussing, it uses sustainable data capture across the FDA required 15-year follow up period for certain CGTs, including those using genome editing techniques like CRISPR-Cas9. So I was wondering, Pamela, if you could share with listeners the finer details on how Medable reduces complexity, putting patient care at the heart of clinical trial design.
Great. So, if you think about these type of trials, they start at the end of the trial that a participant is in, where they receive that treatment, right? So they start at the final visit of the trial that allowed that patient to receive that treatment. So at that point, we would conduct a consent for the 15-year follow-up, and then we would work with the companies to sort of understand what their needs are for data collection, because it could be different in every situation. It could be that most of the times, though, there are twice a year visits for the first 5 years, and then there's an annual visit thereafter. And what we're working through with our partners is, what is it you want to collect or need to collect in those first 5 years? And it's usually some version of blood draws to test for hemonc type things, and imaging to test potential tumor sizes and things of that nature. So those, in a brick and mortar setting, in the traditional setting, patients would come back to that research site and get those tests done. And there would also be a physical and things of that nature. So we're working with the customers to go like, well, these labs and these imaging studies are standard of care, and they can be done at the local healthcare provider level. So if a patient lives in Seattle and the trial was in New York City, they could get their blood work and their imaging done in Seattle. And then instead of a physical exam, we would have very extensive questionnaires about signs and symptoms of patients. And the participant would fill that out on their phone. And then if there was any issue that was identified, it would revert. They would get a signal back to the one site or the few sites in this scenario that would still do the follow up. And that site would follow up with the participant, talk to the participant, and then send them back to their local physician for maybe a full extensive physical exam. So the involvement and the burden is much less, and we would really focus on the things that we're looking that were like at a trigger level identified as something that needed follow up to do the follow up. And then after the 5 years, it would revert to a once a year follow up with as needed blood work. I don't know if there might still be imaging at that time, but that is all dependent on the trial. And so it's like this interface of using technology where before the participants would have had a lot more burden to be part of that trial. And we do that in partnership with CROs, because we have the technology platform, and the CROs would then have the clinical platform to make that happen. But the reduction in burden and the improvement in sustainability, both for the participants, who now, per the statistic you were mentioning, like half of them will want to drop out after 80% wants to drop out after 5 years. And that is the reason we're doing these studies, is to make sure that we can keep giving them to other people. And the other part of this technology platform is that hopefully it doesn't happen, but it can happen that a signal is detected. And now, instead of twice a year, a participant may need to do some follow up 4 times a year. With a technology first approach, that is a lot more feasible than if they were to come in. We've heard from some of the sites that patients fly in from different continents, basically from Europe and Australia, to come to the US to take part in these trials. If you have a disease that now potentially has a cure, that's a life changer, right? But then to sign up for 15 years of coming back to that site is just not possible. Our platform has the ability to do the consent online, and the first consent to be in person, but with a technology backup. And then you could do reconsenting if needed, just with televisits. We have the platform to deliver questionnaires to participants' phones, to, clinical outcome assessments and other questionnaires, symptom diaries. Maybe there would be medication diaries that if a patient starts a new treatment, they could alert the site at any time. Or if there was a new cancer detected by their local doctors, they could submit that as well. So I think the system actually potentially improves the data collection over what the traditional systems would be.
Thank you for that, Pamela. As you say, it's following this hope, and there is such a potential of hope for betterment of their disease and even their quality of life with these types of treatments that they literally will, these patients, go across continents. So let's take it back to this year's ASCO Congress. And I appreciate, as you mentioned earlier, you didn't get a lot of time to really attend the presentations, but perhaps by even word of mouth on site, what personally really stood out for you in the presentations this year? I mean, was there a hype about something? Was there an underappreciated innovation even?
I think when I perused the program, I was trying to look for presentations around clinical trial improvements and things like that. And one of the things that stood out to me was a study by Emory, and they were using three different systems to accrue patients into a clinical trial. Because now we're not talking cell and gene therapy, but regular clinical trials and trying to find representative populations. And typical what you do is I ran a site for 12 years in Sarasota. The coordinators would go through the charts and extract patients that might be eligible for a trial. In this case, they had that as one of the ways. They had another way where it was just AI, I guess scraping through the EHRs to the electronic health records to find patients, and then they had a combined arm. And it was interesting to see those kind of innovations pop up. Um, the other one that stood out to me was one of the breast cancer trials, the Breast 09 trial, because, it's just something that was of interest to me. And the, improvements in HER2 positive trial results is just so amazing for patients, because I cannot, as a woman in mid age, whatever you want to call it, I have a lot of friends who have different kinds of cancer. Breast cancer is always one of them. So I just am really happy to see improvements there. And I think the buzz, it felt like a really positive buzz. It felt like things were changing. And so that's always exciting. I also had the chance to catch up with Laura Esserman and all the work she did on iSpy. And that is, if you think about what that program has done over the past decade, I think they've been in existence, is just amazing. And you see how individuals really can make a difference. And that's always inspiring as well.
Yes, as you say, inspiring and definitely buzz-filled was ASCO 2020.
Yes. Hmm.
So my final question for today, Pamela, takes us back to hope. So what are your future predictions and or hopes for the future of long-term follow-up and the capturing of post-treatment data, given our discussions about the possibilities that technologies such as Medables present for the future of clinical trials?
Well, my hope is that we can create a sustainable system for long-term follow-up for cell and gene therapies, because people know what the cost will be when they go in with a treatment, and they do expected net present value calculations to decide whether to move a treatment forward or not in clinical trials. And if we cannot solve for the cost um, of those cell and long-term follow-up studies, potential treatments may not make it out of that calculation. They'll get stuck in that calculation and decisions will be made that it cannot be done, right? And what that then means is that people don't get the hope of a treatment. The other thing I want to highlight is maybe the human part of that. I've chatted with some patients that have participated in these trials, and they want to participate because a lot of treatments in cell and gene, maybe not in oncology, but they're more genetic. And so they want to make sure that the treatment works for their children or grandchildren should they ever need it because, something may be passed along. So I just hope that we can get this into a better spot so no treatment has to be sort of deprioritized because of that cost, because that means patients won't get the treatments they need and deserve.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure, Pamela.
Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to talk about this. So nice to talk to you too.
And you.
And that concludes another episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about previous installments at pharmaphorum.com/podcasts. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Podbean, and pretty much wherever else you download your other podcasts from. Just search for pharmaphorum and follow and hit subscribe. Of course, don't forget to visit our website itself, where you can sign up for daily and weekly news and analysis bulletins. And do follow us on Blue Sky and LinkedIn at pharmaphorum. That's all for now. Thank you for listening.